This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the president and CEO of Aben Resources, Mr. Jim Pettit. Jim, it's been a few months. How the heck have you been?
Hey, thanks a lot. I've been doing good, getting a little antsy. I want to get back to work. And, we've cleared the path, so now we can, like I just announced, we're heading in there first week of July.
Let's talk about what that looks like. Obviously, a new normal, a new approach. You did announce a 2020 field program at Forest Kerr. Gold is at 1770, and we're in a clear gold bull market and a market that is finally rewarding discoveries, drill results, and accretive actions, right? So I'm encouraged to see that you have a field program planned. What will that look like with everything going on?
Well, it will be a little different this year. We're going to start the season with a field crew up there, just a group of probably 4 geologists. We've got targets identified that we want them to look at and fine tune. We've done a lot of drilling, 20,000 meters of drilling. We've gone and reassessed every meter, every analytical result from every meter. In the off season, we've incorporated what we're seeing with the geophysics, because now we had last season with the geophysics, and we did a lot of drilling as we headed south from that high grade zone that we had initially hit. And we obviously found that things changed, but we're seeing something we never saw before. So we want to send the drill crew or the field crew in there first. And we've got specific areas. You can read the news release we just put out. It kind of identifies 3, but the first one is the main one, and it's a zone between the very high grade north boundary zone and the not so high grade south boundary zone. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. There's a lot of mineralization there. It's just changed from high grade to low grade, and we're trying to get a handle on structure that'll tell us what happened. Why is that north boundary high grade zone there? I mean, it was high grade. We had 4 in one hole 10. Let's say we had 4 mineralized sections of that hole.
Right.
And the high end was 10 meters of 38 grams, which was pretty spectacular. And then all 4 of them were high grade as well. But this is, we want to know why that high grade zone is there. And that comes down to structures and understanding the fault systems, because there's a lot of them. And, I think we've got it. We're onto something, and it's going to take a little bit of field work because we need some more surface mineralization along where we think these fault systems are and where they cross each other. And it's going to just take a little bit of work on their part, because we've got the geophysics. We know what that looks like. We've only got one hole that actually drilled from the east side of the valley. The valley is, the creek running down the middle of it is called the Nelson Creek Fault.
Right.
We've only got one hole that came underneath that fault to the west side. That's in the north boundary, the high-grade zone. And it ended in really good mineralization. And then when we drilled in the south boundary area, that was about 1.5 kilometers to the south, we hit a lot of mineralization but lower grade. Looks an awful lot like what's at the bottom of that one hole that drilled to the west side. And then this last season, we drilled even further south from the south boundary on what's called the benchlands, where our core shacks were. And we drilled there and hit just some really good mineralization. It looks identical to the south boundary, looks identical to that one hole where the mineralization was at the bottom of it on the west side. So we've kind of identified a new fault called the Benchland Fault south of the south boundary, and we think it connects right up to the south boundary drilling, and ultimately would probably connect right up to the Nelson Creek Fault. And then there's a series of cross-cutting faults that we've identified now. And at the north end of the whole system, the north boundary zone, the high grade, there is a cross-cutting fault called the Blind Fault that comes right across at an angle. And it looks like where the Nelson Creek Fault deviated to the northeast on the Blind Fault, that's where the high grade was. So we're looking for these other faults. And then we've identified a series of them that we want to get and do some sampling on the surface, and then, put a drill on it.
You've had some time, Jim, to go over the data, as you mentioned. For those that aren't familiar with the story, we have a lot of new people in this space. You had the best intercept returned 38.7 grams per ton gold over 10 meters. It got the market excited, rightfully so. That was within, I think, 122 meters of 1.2 grams per ton gold from that north boundary. And as you mentioned, you weren't able to duplicate those spectacular results. What's been the biggest insight in poring over the data thus far, having the time to sit down and really go hole by hole and kind of put everything in its place? Has it been those faults and those structures that you mentioned?
Well, there was something that was controlling the high grade, and there was a couple holes there that were really good, and the blind fault that comes down from the northeast to the southwest, crossing the Nelson Creek fault. It's right there, and hard to deny it. And we've got a couple other areas that we've identified now that look a lot like that. I mean, you've got a deflection of the main fault, the Nelson Creek fault, and then if we extrapolate the southern fault, the new one, the Benchland fault, it comes straight up, and we think it'll deviate to the northeast and connect up to the Nelson Creek fault. And where those bends are and where you've got these cross-cutting faults, that's where we're going to be concentrating a lot of our surface work, because we do have the geophysics is really plain to see, and there are a couple of these big structures we didn't test last year that are just on the west side, and we want to test that because one thing we did notice as we headed south from the high-grade zone is the alteration changes. You get less potassic alteration, which gives you an indication of a heat source. And there's a big intrusion right to the west across the Nelson Creek fault that we didn't test last year. We have no surface work done there because there's a lot of scree coming off the mountaintops. So you got a lot of shattered rock that's fallen down, and it's covered the surface. So there's no outcrop, but we're going to go in there and do some rock sampling, and we will find some outcrop to work with, and we want to put a couple of holes in that system, that big intrusion. It's also associated with these faults. So it's one of the things we're getting out of this season going forward is the ability to take the time to really analyze with all the tools in the toolkit, the geophysics, the old drill results, and surface results. Whereas the first couple of years, we were drilling blind, just looking at possible outcrop, and that we were fortunate to hit early on and attract a fair amount of money. Right, we raised a lot of money the last couple of years. But going forward, we've got more information to work with. It's making us theoretically smarter to go in there and with a fair amount of confidence when we do drill. And that's something we didn't have that luxury before, because the season's so short. We'd go up there and we'd drill, and then we overlaid the geophysics, and we could see some targets that we thought would work. Some of them did actually, and some of them didn't. But now we've come up with this whole concept that looks like it's going to pull together.
Well, in a sense, you were also a victim of your own early success, right? When you hit 38.7 grams per ton gold over 10 meters, it's a heck of a bar to set for yourself. Yeah. Let me ask you, Jim, given COVID and everything going on, how has that affected hiring contractors and the supply chain in the field? I have to believe there's been an impact there.
Oh, there is. There's, the government has finally issued, and this is why, we're good to go now, is how to handle exploration programs and remote facilities like mines and that sort of thing. And they came back to us and gave us some rules that said, okay, here's what you got to do, signage, blah, blah, blah. Well, we had the conversation with them the other day, the government employees. They said, where are we going to put signs up? The camp is going to be on top of the mountain. There's no point in having signs. There's only going to be 6 people. if we have we're permitted for a camp on top of the mountain, a maximum I think of 8 people. So, we're going to have a cook and we're going to have 4 GOs that'll alternate in and out, and then 2 senior GOs doing all the field work. And they said you're only allowed 2 people plus the pilot in a helicopter. Well, we have 6-man helicopters, and we're not going to use a helicopter. Once the guys are up there, they're going to traverse to where they have to go, because we're in an environment up top there that they can do that. It's not cliffs or anything like that. But I decided to do it this way with the exploration team and the field team first, is to keep the camp population down. And when we get a drill up there in the second half of the season, that's going to increase the size of the camp, and we'll move it back down to where it's been the last several years, down by the Bob Quinn airstrip beside the highway. And there's a trailer park, and we've got 2 big double-wide trailers, and we can put all kinds of people in there, and then they get flown up every morning and flown back down every afternoon. But it's just managing the size, because if someone gets sick or someone comes back from a break and they've got a fever, well, then we have to have a separate tent to isolate them. And I don't know what the chances of that are, but you got to be ready for it. And so the fewer people we have in camp, the better.
Good. Well, Jim, it's exciting to see you back out in the field soon. I'm looking forward to the company generating drill targets, and hopefully you can make some time and come back and talk to us about those once you got those up and going.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that'll be an ongoing thing. I think there'll be a fair amount of news
Fantastic.
to talk about. Yep.
Good. Jim, thank you so much for your time. You be safe out there.
Okay, and I just wanted to say we've got a brand new website.
There you go.
So have a look, and it explains what we're looking at and where we want to concentrate. It's pretty good. A lot of maps.
We'll make sure to put a link up. I know it's www.abenresources.com, but we'll put a link up with the transcript and make sure everybody gets in there. I appreciate it, Jim.
Okay, anytime.